It's time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. With South Korea aiming to play a greater role in world affairs beyond its own immediate security concerns caused by North Korea's nuclear program, Seoul is actively involving itself in global initiatives and discussions under the Yoon Suk-yeol administration. We discuss today South Korea's expanding realm of foreign policy and its goal of becoming a global pivotal state to reinforce liberal democratic values in the world order. And joining us for this discussion in studio today is Stephen Wertheim, Senior Fellow in the American Statecraft Program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and author and historian. Mr. Wertheim is one of the world's top opinion leaders of US foreign policy and contemporary world issues, and it's a pleasure and an honor to have you in our studio today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
And well, first of all, Dr. Wertheim, I believe you're in Seoul. You were in Seoul for the past week to attend the World Emerging Security Forum organised by South Korea's Foreign Ministry. And well, you were part of a discussion on cybersecurity, which some see as revolutionising warcraft and military postures all around the world. So, well, first of all, what was your main takeaways from that forum?
Well, the World Emerging Security Forum is held to bring greater attention to some unconventional challenges that the world faces in common. Cybersecurity, global health, and climate were at the center of this year's forum, which people can watch on YouTube, no less. And, I think the takeaway for me was how difficult it is becoming now to have effective international cooperation. We've seen geopolitical divisions harden in the world after events that could have been unified. The pandemic could have been something that brought humanity together against a disease that we all faced. The war in Ukraine, an illegal invasion of a sovereign country, again, something that could have brought much of the world together, and it's brought some of the world together. But what we've seen happen, we've seen a kind of X-ray about where we stand as a global community over the last few years, and we found out that unfortunately we are more divided than we have been in the past several decades. So I think that will make effective cooperation more difficult. It'll make it easier to some extent for countries that are aligned with one another to cooperate. And we've seen South Korea now participating in the upcoming NATO summit. But it will also make it more challenging to prevent the motivations that cause problems in the cyber realm and other realms in the first place.
And well, speaking of South Korea's role in such discussions, I mean, efforts like holding the Security Forum, for instance, South Korea really is trying to become what it calls a global pivotal state. And how do you see Seoul's expanding role in the world?
Well, this is one of President Yoon's ways of describing his vision for Korea's foreign policy. I think the war in Ukraine has brought out some of the vulnerabilities that countries face, not just in Europe, but also here in the Asia Pacific. And so I think under the rubric of a global pivotal state, what I see President Yoon doing is trying to show how valuable Korea is to countries all around the world, not just in the realm of conventional political issues, but also in economics, such as semiconductors and supply chain security. So I think that's a part of his effort, which is symbolized by Korea's participation in the NATO summit. I also think that in light of the difficulty of getting cooperation in the United Nations around the North Korea issue, we've seen China and Russia refuse to participate in sanctions. There's a need to look for new allies and partners.
Right, and are you seeing South Korea participate more in the Quad working groups as well with the new Yoon administration?
Yeah, South Korea has stepped up its participation in the Quad. We'll see if South Korea actually joins the Quad formally or continues to participate in a more informal way. I think the big question here is just how far South Korea will go in efforts that either are or might be perceived to be aimed at constraining the power and influence of China, something that Seoul is often kind of torn between those objectives. So that remains to be determined probably by the government itself.
Well, for now, President Yoon Suk-yeol, he's jetting off on Monday to Madrid to join in the NATO summit, something that a South Korean leader hasn't done previously. So it's quite unprecedented in terms of Seoul's diplomacy there. And, well, Seoul is also planning to establish a mission to NATO as well in Brussels. And in May, just last month, it became the first Asian country to join NATO's cyber defense group. And, well, with all these moves, it seems that South Korea is pulling out all the stops to really support the US and its allies, its transatlantic allies. And as South Korea continues to align itself with this treaty, how do you see its role expanding? How do you see it cooperating with NATO?
Well, this is a good question. I don't think anyone expects South Korea or other Asian countries to join NATO. That's not in the cards, but the kind of informal participation has been increasing. South Korea is one of 4 Asia-Pacific countries that are having their heads of government attend the NATO summit this week. And I think because those countries are not going to join the defense alliance, their main contribution may be in 2 realms. One of them might be under the realm of what we might call geoeconomics, how geopolitics and economics relate. And that has to do with supply chains, climate change, the green transition, and so forth. And the other issue, I think, has to do with China, because NATO itself is going to adopt a new strategic concept in this summit, something it hasn't done since 2010. It's kind of like the national security strategy for NATO. And the last one didn't even mention China. This one is going to be very different. Of course, the threat that Russia poses to the Euro-Atlantic area will be at the top of the agenda. But I would expect China to receive substantial and significant mentions as well. And so I think the inclusion of those Asia-Pacific 4 countries is part of this effort to integrate the transatlantic and trans-Pacific alliances a little bit more. Not completely, but a little bit more.
Right, so we are seeing South Korea, Australia, Japan and New Zealand join in this NATO summit. And as you sort of already mentioned, do you see the 2 traditional US allies, the groups of allies really merging together? Is this what we're going to continue to see?
I think we are seeing some movement towards not so much convergence, but towards greater integration. This is, I think, one of the reasons why several countries in Asia, including South Korea, participated in the sanctions on Russia after Russia's invasion of Ukraine on February 24th. They recognize that not just that it's a problem for the international order to have countries violating international law if it's to go without consequences, but also that something similar might occur in Asia. And that's something that no one wants to see, except potentially countries that might be the perpetrators, obviously. So I think the attempt to integrate alliances is an attempt to also think ahead to what might be a conflict across the Taiwan Strait or even on the Korean Peninsula, to make sure that there is a plan if those kinds of contingencies were to occur. On the other hand, so I think it makes sense for these U.S. alliances to be somewhat more integrated. But to some extent, the integration is an alternative to the possibility that the United States might decide to prioritize security in one region more than another. For example, one option that the United States might have would be to lower its military role in Europe, given how much more attention its European allies and partners are giving now to the threat that Russia poses, in order to allow the United States to concentrate on security in Asia, which is important, especially because of the scale of Chinese economic and military power. It's quite a bit larger than the scale of Russian power relative to the rest of Europe. So I think in some sense the desire to integrate the alliances to some degree is an alternative to having a division of labor between the United States and Europe.
And certainly the Defense Secretary, Mr. Lloyd Austin, he said that China is going to be, the Indo-Pacific is going to be the main theatre of the US's security concerns. And well, Mr. Biden, though, President Biden, is he going to be able to really focus on these foreign affairs issues with, of course, China and Russia being on top of his agenda when, of course, you have the November elections coming up? Do you think he's going to continue pursuing this foreign policy for the middle class?
Well, it's a little hard to know what to make of the foreign policy for the middle class at this point. A year ago, when the United States withdrew from Afghanistan, that was, you might say, an accomplishment that could be under the rubric of a foreign policy for the middle class. And although the circumstances of the withdrawal were unpopular, the basic fact of the withdrawal was widely popular in the United States. But now the war in Ukraine has really thrown those plans awry. It has occupied the attention of senior leaders, inevitably so. All along in the course of the war in Ukraine, the United States government has been eager to reassure its allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific that it still recognizes that the Indo-Pacific is the most important place for the United States to play a leadership role going forward. Nevertheless, you can't escape the reality of what's happening in the war in Ukraine and how it's having a global impact and a domestic impact. And now the United States has sent more than $6 billion in military aid to Ukraine since the war began. That makes Ukraine actually the largest annual recipient of U.S. security assistance in the 21st century. So I think it remains to be seen how that issue will play in American domestic politics. So far, the idea of imposing costs on Russia and supporting Ukraine, that's certainly popular in the United States. The question is, at what cost? And Americans haven't seen too much of a cost yet, but with rising inflation and energy and food prices increasing, it could become more of a problem for President Biden in the November elections and going forward as well.
Right, well, given the huge list of domestic priorities not helped by soaring inflation and costs, as you mentioned, well, how do you think President Biden is going to really pursue his foreign policy, though? Some have assumed that he's going to pursue this offshore balancing strategy, but how do you personally think that he should manage his transatlantic and Indo-Pacific affairs?
Well, I think that having more of a division of labor in America's transatlantic alliance would be a good way to go. In other words, I think something like an offshore balancing approach for the United States vis-a-vis the greater Middle East and Europe would be wise, but not the Indo-Pacific. If you look at Europe and the Middle East, it would be very difficult for any one hostile power to dominate those regions. As aggressive as Russia has shown itself to be in Eastern Europe, Russia has an economy that, by the most conservative metric, is 5 times smaller than that of the rest of Europe, even smaller now, surely, after the sanctions. And those sanctions will continue to hit the Russian economy. So I think Europe has the ability to balance against the Russian threat. But so far, I'm not seeing signs that the United States is actually very serious about reducing its role in Europe. It's eager to cap the number of troops that it stations permanently in Europe. Right now, that's at 100,000. But the real concern is, what if there were to be a conflict simultaneously with Russia in Europe and China in the Indo-Pacific? That would be very hard for the United States to play the leading role simultaneously in that kind of circumstance. So I think it would be wise to look toward the future and focus on security in Asia as well as the needs of Americans at home.
Right, and one security threat in the Indo-Pacific and of immediate threat to South Korea, of course, is North Korea. And we've seen North Korea launch many missile provocations this year over the past 6 months. And there's talk of an impending nuclear test as well. And in light of these growing provocations from the North, how do you think South Korea and the United States should really approach the regime in engaging it in denuclearization talks and also responding to its hostilities?
Well, the first step is deterrence, and this is well appreciated in Seoul and Washington. The really dramatic growth in North Korea's nuclear weapons and missile capabilities do require adjustments. We've just seen North Korea signal that it wants to station tactical nuclear weapons on the front lines. Which is a really unfortunate development. So I think it will take a lot of work to establish how deterrence should work. But then we have to think about what happens next. What happens when North Korea is actually willing to talk again? Do we want to continue to talk under the rubric of denuclearization, even though we have to be honest, North Korea has shown no signs of actually wanting to completely dismantle its nuclear weapons capabilities? Perhaps a more pragmatic framework under the rubric of normalization would be more productive. We've lived with a North Korean nuclear capability, unfortunately, for quite some time. What we have to do is focus on avoiding a conflict and making some diplomatic progress.
And at the NATO summit, the leaders of South Korea, the United States and Japan will be meeting on the sidelines to hold a trilateral summit. And what kinds of discussions do you expect to take place based on North Korea, of course?
Yeah, I think North Korea will be at the top of the agenda for the trilateral meeting. This is the first one in about 5 years, so it's very significant. I'm not sure I have too high hopes, given that there are elections for Japan's, the upper house of its parliament, coming up next month. But perhaps this is the beginning of some progress in the trilateral relationship, which is an important priority for Washington. And in addition to discussing extended nuclear deterrence and other issues pertaining to North Korea, perhaps there could be even some progress in bringing Seoul and Tokyo together. There are, of course, export controls that Japan has placed on chemicals that are needed for South Korea's semiconductor industry. So perhaps in the months and years to come, we'll see some better relations between those two countries, as well as a new concept for deterring North Korea.
Well, I'm afraid we're out of time, so this is where we'll have to leave the interview. But thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Wertheim. And I hope you enjoyed your trip in Seoul, despite the humidity and the rain that we've seen.
Very much so. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Wertheim.